So thank you for inviting me. I have given this talk to certain other um, venues. My background is I spent 35 years on Wall Street, both as a sell-side analyst and then a money manager. And then I ended my career as a director of equity research at Lord Abbett, and I was also a global fund manager, and I managed money. So all of the things tended to focus on investing. Um, and in many jobs, I hired people. So I became really interested in the hiring process. And that's why in my reinvention post-retirement, I decided to focus more on career coaching than investing. Um, in the process of my own reinvention, I have coached master's students at Columbia, mid-career executives at the Sloan School at MIT, first generation college students at City College. And then I'm also a career counselor at LHH, which is the largest outplacement firm for mid-career executives. And some of my clients are on this call, but I'll let them self-identify themselves. So I see a lot of familiar faces. Um, and what became very clear to me is job search is about networking. Networking is about data. And most people said, well, it's a process. You just go ask a lot of people and you network. And I sort of inverted that and said, no, the quality of data informs the quality of your introduction, informs the quality of your networking in your informational interviews, and informs the quality of your landing. So this is all motivated by how do you get GPS in your job search. Okay, this is going to be a two-way conversation. So if you have any questions, just put it in the chat. We're going to do some live demos to address your individualized needs and job search. And if at the end of that we haven't answered your outstanding questions, I'll leave my email address or LinkedIn, and you can LinkedIn message me or send me an email, and I'll be happy to help. Okay. So first is we're going to talk about PitchBook and how it's used in job search and networking. We'll give a live demo of PitchBook. I'm going to give a live demo of Perplexity, which is a ChatGPT search engine that I use in job search. And I'll just show you some typical queries that I use with my clients. And then we'll go into Q&A. So what is PitchBook? PitchBook is a subscription tool which unfortunately is not available to everybody. They sell primarily to business, and their business model is to capture everybody's data, aggregate it, and have it searchable and queryable to investors' funds, on investors, their investments, their funds, their exits, and the markets that they invest in. Now, to stay competitive, I think you need to know, in a fast-paced landscape, you need to have insight into the flow of capital across the entire venture capital and merger and acquisition ecosystem. And the way you should think about it is EDGAR and the ability to access the SEC.gov for public companies. This is the same analog tool for private companies. And every private equity and venture capital firm is very religious about reporting this data, and the data is quite accurate. Okay, why is my slide not? Okay. So many FANG members have expressed a preference to work for smaller rather than larger firms. And this presentation is a roadmap or a template of how to research private firms, how to identify smaller firms that could be companies or candidates for you to target. So what are the friction points to switching a career? The first is not enough market research and due diligence to enable your alignment to the job market opportunity and the strategic action you should take. The second is if you have an unclear value proposition or elevator pitch on your skill sets. And the final issue is the lack of understanding of the importance of informational interviewing and networking. I can't tell you, in the 5 years I've been doing job search, I probably have now worked with 1,000 people. And my view is 80% of them are finding these jobs through word of mouth not, I repeat, not executive recruiters and not LinkedIn or Indeed postings. So my postulate is you should be spending, if 80% of the leads are coming from networking, you should spend 80% of your time networking. And the quality of your networking is a function of the quality of your data. So you need to identify your target path, and you have to figure out what you're trying to achieve, how you're going to advance from your current position, whether you're going to switch to a new business or a functional area, are you going to pursue corporate innovation or entrepreneurship, and what role or levels are you targeting? And you need to benchmark your skill set by looking at LinkedIn. So you need to target at least 10 people and look at their competencies that are listed. What strengths do you have that align with them? And do you have any gaps where you could potentially upskill? So you have to develop your exploration pitch and reality test your hypothesis as whether you have the skill sets for that path. Informational interviews is the secret sauce or the key to the kingdom for that approach. Also, informational interviews will help you discover answers to questions you don't even know were important. It gives you an opportunity to hypothesis test. You can ask open-ended questions. But the key insight is that 80% of job landings are by word of mouth, and it's essential to use the word to hack that switch. So there are all kinds of open source tools to do this research. LinkedIn is open source. X and Twitter is open source. I love this website called levels.fyi that gives you starting salaries and comp at many leading companies. And if you're looking at public companies, sec.edgar.gov is the leading source for filings on financials for public companies. Also, you might find that Crunchbase is a poor person's version of PitchBook. So if you can't get access to PitchBook, try Crunchbase and it'll have some of the same information. All right, what is market research? It's the process of determining the viability of a new service or product by conducting directly with potential customers. So I'm all about a famous saying. I don't know if you remember the movie that came out in about 1975. It was called All the President's Men. And Hal Holbrook had this line in the movie because he played Deep Throat. This was a function of Nixon's resignation and Bernstein and what's the other guy's name?
Woodward
and Bernstein. Thank you. Inquiry into that, and he said, follow the money. This is very similar. You got to follow the money. If you can follow the money for funding in private companies, all of a sudden, all these private equity and venture capital firms have a war chest. And guess what it's funding? It's funding hiring people like you. So if you can filter who took in billions of dollars, that's sort of an interesting leading indicator that they might hire. So you can query who's providing funding by the private equity firm. You can query individual company fundings. You can aggregate the fund flows into artificial intelligence and machine learning as well as fintech. And you can query investments by private equity and VC funds by geography and stage of company. Now, Reid Hoffman is the original founder of LinkedIn. And he said, you need to pick an industry, not a job. And I think that's apt. You need to identify the industry, where's the nascent areas of growth, identify your target companies, and search by criteria and see things that will meet your needs. So for public companies, I've said you can go to sec.gov. For private companies, you need to have access to the financial backers and the stakeholders, including their customers. And that's where PitchBook comes in. All right, so here's the public slide deck on PitchBook. It says you can get ahead with better data. Private markets continue to grow in value and opportunity. To stay ahead, you need to have access and insight of the flow of capital. And essentially, this is all about private market intelligence, their sourcing investments, their business development, networking, and deal execution. this product is primarily a business-to-business product, and it's sold to accounting and law firms. So Adele, maybe your firm has this. I don't know. I don't know. Or probably some of your peer
Yeah,
institutions have it. You
yeah, we
notice
do,
this,
and we use it.
and Skadden Arps and DLA Piper has it. So I mean, it's a business-to-business app. Now, what's interesting is I was working with a client this week, and he said, "How do I get this?" And I said, "What I would suggest you do is see if any of your children or relatives that are in college have access." And he said, "Well, I have a daughter at Penn." And I said, "My guess is they give it to the Wharton students and not to the Penn students." And he called back in 5 minutes and he said, "You were right. The Wharton students get it. The Penn students don't get it." So they're very selective of who they seed to. And this is like a Trojan horse where they're giving the razors, or giving the shaving, not the blades. And you have all these precocious students that are then going into private equity and VC that have learned this tool. So what and who can you research? It's all things and everything. It's the limited partners, the advisors, the professionals, the debt lenders, the funds. The amount of data. This is like going from black and white TV to high definition 3D TV. It's just like unbelievable. All right, there are other competitors. The cheap competitor, I think, is Crunchbase. Capital IQ is the paid source that every investment bank has. And I don't know Privco, but that's another one. Probably the most pervasive one is D&B Hoovers. And this one I find not as robust. All right, before we go into the demo, I just want to give some thoughts on networking. Networking has several objectives. The first is to gain insight about your reinvention or pivot. It's to identify target firms. It's to identify the hiring manager. And it's also to gain insight about finding your unique job opportunity. I think of it as sort of a Venn diagram. It's the intersection of a market demand for your skills and what the demand for your skills, the supply of your skills, which is you, and what you want to do. And that Venn diagram overlap is your target. And therefore, your whole branding statement should be targeted for that Venn diagram overlap. So what are popular transitions for financial service executives? I'm going to take a sip of water before I read this. I mean, first and foremost is fintech. And the second thing now is probably the intersection of AI and machine learning to fintech and finance. Now, you may not have the skills or the interest in those areas, and you can customize this to the areas that you are interested in. But these are in high demand. And my view is the closer you can be to something that's in high demand, the more barriers to entry and the more sticky your job is. The least sticky job is where you're a cost center and you are not tied to the product or revenue. And the most sticky is where you're in high demand for something that's specialized and very few people can do. So if you can attach yourself to fintech or AI or machine learning, or have some sophisticated experience in risk management, fraud detection, compliance and regulatory reporting, or personalized asset allocation and finance advice, or credit underwriting, those are in hot demand. All right, so I'm going to now pause and I'm going to go into PitchBook and we're going to do a demo. All right, please give me a thumbs up if you can see PitchBook investors and funds search. Can you see it?
No, your screen's not coming through.
Okay, hold on. Let's do it again. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, thumbs up. All right, first thing, let's look on the left side. This has curated verticals on all these hot areas. But these are primarily industry segments that private companies focus on. So if you aggregated where all the money is going in venture capital and private equity, more or less the growth people would be going toward these segments. And I'm just going to pick the ones that I think are going to be most interesting to people in financial services as this is a thing. I mean, if I went into pharma tech or mobility or Internet of Things, that may not be interesting. Insure tech would be very interesting to people in insurance, but fintech is probably the most interesting thing for people in our group. And if you look at this carefully, this has both public companies and private companies. It has how much they've raised in financing. It has the industry subsector. And then if you go to the right, it also has the headquarters, their website, and who the backers are. So let's just take an example of a company that I think is interesting. Well, let's do it this way. I'm going to put in Stripe. Stripe is probably the leading company that everybody thinks is going to go public at some point. So it tells you that the last deal they raised $70 million. The company is being valued at $50 billion in the private markets. That's incredible. And PitchBook is saying there's a 98% probability it goes public. They've raised 8.7 billion and are now being valued at 50 billion. So if you take the ratio of that, early investors are up. There's a huge ratio and step up in valuation. Now, the president, there's his email address. And if you were really interested in this company, it would give you general information. It would give you the deals they've done and when. It would give you the news and when they're in the news. And some of them, it will give you their financials. So in this one, let's see if it does. Yeah, it says that they have 14 billion in revenue ending in 2022. What's interesting is they haven't updated that. But some of these that gives you cash flows and balance sheets so you can actually do some sophisticated financial analysis to see what's going on. But one of the first things I do, if I were interested in this company, is I would go to Patrick Collison's Twitter site and call it up and then see who he follows. And inevitably, this is like looking at his iPhone. He will tell you all the VCs and all the people he's connected to. And you then have first and second and third degree connections. And you can probably figure out if you know someone who's either an external stakeholder or an internal stakeholder. I find it much more robust than going to LinkedIn. And I highly encourage you, if you don't have a subscription to X, to get it. Notwithstanding the controversies that are there right now. All right, so let's go back to fintech. So this gives me all of them. And then we should decide whether we could sort them by different categories. And depending on what your experience is, you would want to sort by each of these categories. So typically when I work with my clients, what I do is I say, okay, what's your target? And then we focus on some set of criteria so that we narrow this down to not 44,000 companies, but something that's appropriate. And usually it's by how much money they've raised, an area of specialization, a location, and some objective metric which aligns your interests with theirs. let me pause and see if anybody has any questions about this aspect of it before I continue with the demo, because I just want to respond to some of your curiosities.
Rick, I put a couple comments in the chat. You mind if I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. First, I saw on the New York Public Library website that PitchBook is there. I don't know if it's on-site only or online, but anybody's got a subscription there could try that. But the first question is, how accurate really is the privately held company data in PitchBook, and how do they acquire that data? It seems like that's closely held.
Yeah, I think it is self-reported, and in many cases it lags. So you have to be a very smart customer to understand the veracity of the data.
So lags in time, or it lacks in accuracy or precision or accuracy?
I think the accuracy is good. It's just it sometimes is stale. So, for example, Stripe had a down round, which is in the vernacular, it means that the next round was at a lower valuation than the previous round.
Mhm.
And it wasn't in their best interest to self-report that until it was consummated. And at that point, but since this is like the evolution of watching color TV. Yes, there's 380i and 380p, and then there's high definition, and this is the best thing out there. If you were an insider, would you have better data? Sure. But this is first order good enough for you to figure out who you might want to talk to and to start the process rolling.
Perfect. That's probably the best answer I could get, because good enough means I can use this for my decisions in my job search.
Oh, I absolutely think you can. And I
Excellent.
think without this, I mean, the worst case I see is somebody gets offered a job. I had a woman who was a member of FANG hit me up for some due diligence on a healthcare company she was going up for. And the company was burning so much cash, they were going to run out of cash in the next 6 months. And we were able to use this to sort of look at the cash burn rate and say, look, if they don't get FDA approval, this is not a stable platform for you. So this is why I love this job for me, because it's the combination of all my skill sets. My first job out of business school was in venture capital. Then I spent 30 years analyzing companies, and then I did a lot of hiring. So it's sort of like the Venn diagram of all the things I like to do.
Yep, and I can see right off the bat developing new target company lists. And once I am going into an interview with a hiring manager, I can see through the walls. I know exactly what they're confronting. I know what they're trying to shield me from. I know the secrets.
Yes. And then I'm going to show you the secret sauce, which is you go to Twitter and then you see their personal Rolodex and you can see who they're connected with. So the only thing you're lacking is you're not seeing the closing documents of the deals as consummated, because it's not public information until they disclose it. But that would be inside information. And you know, your goal is not to get inside information. Your goal is to get insightful information.
Right. And less than 90 days ago is the latest and greatest. So that should be good enough for a search, for a job search.
Yes, I think to use the math, you want to see if the first derivative or second derivative is positive or negative. You want to see if they're on a positive inflection or a negative inflection. And therefore, you want to skate to the puck to the companies that are growing, because they'll attract capital. If they attract capital, they'll hire people like you. And if they're growing, it'll be sticky or stickier.
Right. And trending negative means there's opportunities for crisis management or whatever else to correct the downturns.
It's just, you don't want to be the last in a sinking ship.
Oh, I prefer growth, but some people like the other side, the dark side. Go ahead.
Well, no, I'm a value investor. A value investor, as long as there's a catalyst for change and a strong balance sheet, turnarounds are great. It's just, you better do it from a position of strength. And then you also have to be savvy about their capital structure and understand if the debt is floating or fixed, and whether their debt covenants are such that they'll be in violation.
I'm not arguing as an investor, you're absolutely right. I'm just saying for turnaround people, they're looking for those ones that are going into
Yeah,
uncharted waters.
I understand. Okay, let's move to the next question. Anybody can, what was the next question in chat? Could somebody read them to me? Let's see. Oh, can you get PitchBook for free? Um, I'll be curious if you were correct and you can get it at the New York Library. You can get a Bloomberg at the New York Library. My suspicion is you probably have to sign up like you used to have to sign up for a Bloomberg, and if you can, do it. But I just wonder if it's a stripped down version, because one of the ways PitchBook makes money is if I want to download into a spreadsheet all this data, I have to get another sleeve of the subscription and they charge for that.
Right.
And so I become very adept at the concept of, if you have a Mac, I want all you guys to hit Shift Command 3 and see what happens. Don't worry, your computer won't blow up. Shift Command 3 if you have a Mac. Guess what it just did? It took a picture of your screen. So all you really need to do is to learn how to do that, and then you're in good shape.
Yeah. So Rick, it seems quite similar to like a Zoom info. I'm trying to connect the dots on how this helps folks that are not looking for venture capital type firms to be their next employer. I'm trying to figure this out for the bigger firms where
Okay.
this helps.
All right. So let's do a search. Because I would put to you, Michael, the issue is you can do a plug and play, go back to a bulge bracket firm, but there are ancillary, there are adjacent niches that are private companies, whether it's RIAs, whether it's outsourced CIO. We can think of a bunch of things which are not bulge bracket firms that are spin outs or adjacencies. And
That are very healthy is the point.
whether they're healthy or not is second order. First order is identifying them. And you have a two-pronged objective. One is to gain insight as to whether you might want to pivot. And the second is to have informational interviews with people that are in that ecosystem so that they could potentially either give you insight or make introductions. So
Gotcha.
you want to start a conversation. So we need to figure out people you can talk to. And it is probably an axiom of life is there's probably more you don't know than you do know. And so we have to uncover the things we don't know. And that's what this is trying to do. So let's look under, do this search. Check this out. By the way, Michael, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And I assume everybody, they don't need to see my chat. Okay. So we're going to look at private equity and VC-backed companies. We're going to look at deals which are later stage because we want bigger companies. We're going to say we only want companies that are in Connecticut and New Jersey and New York. Notice that we're down to 2,400 companies. That's not a lot. Then we're going to look by industry. And for purposes of this, you might rule out REITs because you might not want to do REITs, but we'll just say specialized finance. Under banks, I'm just trying to show you the non-bulge bracket thing. So I'm going to start picking stuff that are a little more esoteric because I'm trying to show you outside your comfort zone, the private companies. If I were looking for the public companies, I would look at the investment banks and these national banks. And then I'm just going to look at fintech because we've decided that. I might look at mortgage tech. I might look at insurtech. And then I go back into financial services and I'm going to do all of these. I'm only down to 352 companies. Now I could, and then I might define the search even more by saying, I want deals that are only over $100 million. And that gets me down to 45. Now, Michael says to me, I really want smaller RIAs. Let's do 25. Okay, so we did that. Then I go back over here and I search. I got 117 companies. And this is I'm focusing on this. So Bill Trust, I have no idea what it does, has raised $2 billion. This one has raised 685, and I'm sorting it by how much money they've raised under the premise that the more money, the more people. Whether it's true, who knows? These are household names, Excel and Andreessen Horowitz. This is like a who's who of VCs. And notice that we sorted it by companies that are in New York. So what I do with my clients is I say, okay, take a picture of this screen. And then they take a picture of this screen. And by the way, have you all hit Shift Command 3? Did it work? Okay. Then
Yes, it did.
Okay. So then go to the next one and take a picture of this. And then go to the third one and take a picture of this. And what I do is I then have people go back and go to the websites and sort of do some homework on this. Let me just show you the granularity of some of these. So in Gracie Point, I love the name since I live near Gracie Mansion. I'm sitting here and going, what the heck is Gracie Point? So it does life insurance, and they've raised 75 million, and they think there's a 72% chance they go public. And you could see who oh, no wonder this guy lives in my building. Oops. That's why it's called Gracie Point. He lives in my building. That makes sense. That's pretty funny, small word. And it goes through the deal history. And the investors. So this is kind of cool. All right. Does anybody have any questions about how to query this or what this data means? Or should we go through one of these and sort of drill down?
Rick, I've got a quick yes/no question for you. Are there special purpose acquisition companies in this data set or excluded?
You mean SPACs?
Yes.
I think I might have toggled on SPACs. You could exclude it if you want to.
But the data is in here for companies that have done that or doing that now.
Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you.
The thing about SPACs, I know everybody wants to disqualify them, but I just closed a SPAC merger like 3 weeks ago in
Oh,
AI.
I'm very intrigued. I want to see it make a resurgence, and I think it's an efficient and very innovative way to grow the economy. So I'm in. Thanks, Adele.
Just look at their balance sheet, see if they have money. If they have money, it's fine.
Yep.
Now understand, let's see. They sometimes have conflicts of interest and sometimes are very self-serving. That being said, not your problem. As long as they have money on the balance sheet, do your buyer beware, but do your homework and follow the money. All right, that's my cynical view. I just want to show you some more granularity on this. These are emerging areas, so you can look at the generative AI companies, NFTs, robotics, I mean, I had a client last year who wanted to go into cannabis, and this found every single cannabis company there was and who had been funded. It was quite something. You can sort it by business to business, business to consumer, energy, finance, healthcare. Let's just look at finance and see what happens. It gives you 11 spaces. Banking as a service, PayFac enablers. What the heck is that? Payment systems that allow software providers to integrate payment offerings. Okay. Now, the other thing that they do is they offer some research on spaces. So, for example, this has some letters on AI and how it's used and what it's used for and what some of the growth areas are. One thing that I would encourage you to do is there is a company called FT Partners that aggregates all the funding for fintech, and they're particularly good about giving who's been funded by whom, and it's open source. So you can go into there and it shows you a lot of these companies. Okay. I now want to go in and show you guys any questions on PitchBook before I turn back to my slides, or also go through an AI engine. We're good on this? Okay. Okay. So this is an AI engine. This is called Perplexity. Can you guys see this or no?
Yes.
Okay. I had a client this morning and I said something, it's easier to write a 3-page cover letter than a 1-page cover letter. And we were trying to figure out who they came from. And first they thought it was Mark Twain, and then I put into this ChatGPT engine and it said, no, it was actually Pascal. In the 17th century is the person who said, if I only made this letter longer because I didn't have enough time to make it shorter. That is sort of my thoughts on when you're writing a resume, do you want it to be long or short? Do you want it to be detail-oriented or pithy? And it depends. The answer is it depends on the reader and it depends on the stakeholder. So if you're introduced by executive search, the resumes are typically 3 to 5 pages because they want to go into incredible detail on your skill sets. If you're going to HR, you probably want a more streamlined, shortened resume. But you can use this to write branding statements for resumes and to rewrite something that is incredibly arcane or technical. So I've worked with many Goldman Sachs and Accenture MDs, and many have the same fault. They speak Goldman or Accenture speak, and everything is in acronyms and everything is in code. And I'm not talking about Python code. It's sort of like Goldman code. And so these tools are helpful to get you to speak the king's or queen's English. And I think it's helpful. So for example, I haven't done this, I'm doing this live. Write a branding statement for a Wall Street risk manager in equities. Why is this not? Okay, here we go. All right. Everybody see this? Can somebody put a thumbs up that you see it? Okay. Look, The negative is it's not your voice, it's homogenized, and people can probably tell that it was done by a chat engine. The positive is it makes sure you're not leaving something out. And it makes sure, and I'm convinced if you take something that's very generic, that it aggregates and learns from lots and lots of people, and this is the wisdom of a lot of people, and it can help you immensely. So let me give you another example. I am interviewing at Amazon, and I am told that it will focus on something called principles. What is that, and how do I prepare? So I didn't remember 16 leadership principles. I just remember something called principles. And here they are. So understand the principles, use the STAR method, situation, task, action, result, practice behavioral questions, mock interviews. So more or less, the best way that these things are used to prepare is through cover letter preparation, working on the branding statement of your resume, and then interview prep.
Rick, can I just ask a quick question? Well, actually, you okay to interrupt for a second?
Go for it.
You alluded to resume length, and as an LHH alum, my question to you is, that 3-page is a senior executive, that 3-page resume, which in the LHH case happens to be very similar across all LHH resumes.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that? I don't know, you're possibly potentially conflicted there. I know I've talked to some senior recruiters at some of the larger firms, and what they've said has they know an LHH resume when they see it, right?
Yeah, I maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I think
They're great, by the way, but they're
yeah.
they're long. They tend to be a little more wordy, but I do like the comprehensiveness of it.
Yeah, so I was working with someone who's extremely senior today. She ran all of Europe for a major bank.
Mhm.
And she and I worked on a 3-page resume that explained the secret sauce of this incredibly accomplished woman.
Okay.
And her response to me is I went back to my internal stakeholders, and the response was, this is great for some people and not great for other people. We need to decide where to have a streamlined version and where to have an extensive version. And that's spot on.
Okay.
It may be that HR would want something more streamlined because they can't understand the arcane details of her skill sets. This is a woman that, did the regulators in Frankfurt, Germany, and organized Brexit for this bank and lived in 5 different places and sits on boards. I mean, you can't explain that in 1 page. I'm sorry.
Right.
But her response is, if this is a final interview, I need this level of detail, but I need something in my voice that's more streamlined for the generalist who sort of understands what I did. Because there's two constituencies. There's the people that get what she did and don't need to have it explained, and there's people that don't get it and need an explanation.
It's almost like you need a bio for the HR person and a true resume for as you move through the process.
Yeah, I think the answer is don't be dogmatic about this and try to figure out where you need what and listen to the market. The market should inform your answer, but most people live in very arcane theoretical constructs, and you got to get into the weeds to explain it, because otherwise. So let me give you an example. I was working with an MD at Goldman who says, I'm in risk management. I'm going, okay, whose risk? The bank's risk or the client's risk?
Right.
Is this part of Dodd-Frank? I mean, and he said, no, no, no. And so finally we wrote this paragraph that I'd love to show you that said part of $1 billion or $1 billion in revenue servicing clients of Goldman Sachs to solve their risk mitigation issues.
Mhm.
These are the internal stakeholders, these are the external stakeholders, and I'm a subject matter expert in this. It was one paragraph. So you can, the issue is A, you have to find your voice, and B, you have to listen to who you're speaking to and adjust your pitch to the audience. It's the same thing here. I've got people here that are former MDs and risk managers, and I have people who are generalists.
Mhm.
So do I write a slide deck to whom? And what I learned early in my career as a sell-side analyst, you have a bimodal distribution. You have the portfolio manager that wants the top-down general parameters of the stock, and then you have the analyst that wants to get in the weeds. And so you had to do both. And you have to think on your feet and sort of adapt, what do you call it? Dynamic adaptation, right?
Yeah, it's just a question of whether you have, I guess, two resumes or you really have your comprehensive resume, and you would hope that the generalist would look at the highlights of it, so to speak, which is kind of that top section of I'll call it the LHH resume.
Well, it's the branding statement.
Yeah.
The thing you have to understand is if my theory is correct that 80% is through word of mouth, the game is get to the hiring manager, and the resume is residual to this process, is not driving the process.
Sure.
So invert this. If I'm correct, then you should be researching, doing informational interviews, and Trojan horse to the hiring manager. And then once you're into the interview process, whether you have a 3-page resume or a 1-page resume is
Irrelevant, I guess, at that point.
yes. Don't infer that, oh, my resume's off by a bit and that's my issue. There could be a whole host of other issues like hiring freezes and supply and demand is out of kilter right now for whatever reason.
Right. Thank you for that.
Okay, let me go back to my slide deck because I want to get to this before we get to some more questions. If I can find what I did with my slides. Here we go. Oh, here it is down here. Give me a second. Okay. Share. Is that it? Okay. Play from current slide. Okay, we went through that. We went through that. We went through that. So the Chat GPT is crafting interview questions, editing resumes, and conducting company research. I had a meeting yesterday with a friend of mine who's on an AI board. He counsels that Open AI 4.0 is probably the best one, but he says you have to be really careful about data and protecting your data. And so if you're querying generalizable things like interview questions, that's fine, but you would never want to say, my personal balance sheet is X and here are my stock holdings or something like that. Just keep your confidential data confidential for obvious reasons. Because he's still worried that most consumer-driven chat bots are not protected. All right. Just some Rick's advice. Manage the negativity. This is a game of trying to stay positive, and having been through a job search before or led a job search before, it has peaks and valleys, and you just have to try to keep optimistic. And every time you come to the conclusion that it must be me or I'm never going to dig out of this, try to focus on there's an alternative narrative. And the alternative narrative is there's a hiring freeze or they're just slow. It could not be you. I highly recommend this book called Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman, who's a Penn professor. This guy helped me when I was too negative about certain things. All right, this is a helpful metaphor for this whole job search area, which is, imagine that you're circling outside in Jamaica Bay and you're going in a circle and you're circling waiting to land. And you're in a holding pattern because air traffic control isn't releasing you from a weather hold. And you want to land your 767 and you're safely going in circles. And so in this metaphor, the air traffic control is the hiring manager, who could be subject to a hiring freeze, or it could be you're stuck in HR and there's a vetting process for approved candidates. But as the clouds clear and you're okayed to land, the ones that will land first are the ones that networked with the hiring manager and have prepared a personal brand so your plane is ready to land. The reason I like this metaphor is it has a positive connotation. It is not you don't have skills, or it's not that you did something wrong. It is that you just have to queue up and get ready for the hiring manager to recognize your talents. All right, let's go to questions. I'd love to respond, and if somebody can read through the chat, I'd love to respond to those.
Yeah, just a reminder for everyone to go ahead and put your contact information in and then save the chat. This is really a great networking opportunity as well. But we don't really have a lot of questions. So I would say people just open up your mics and ask the questions.
Rick, who's the author of Learned Optimism again, the Penn professor's name?
Martin Seligman.
Martin Seligman, thank you.
And he's a PhD. And essentially his thesis was this. It's human nature to sort of tend to focus on a negative thought, especially if you're kind of a glass half empty kind of person, which I am. And his thesis was you have to force yourself to give an alternative optimistic scenario, even if it's low probability, so you can keep your psyche honest about things. Yep. That was incredibly useful in the investment business that I was in, because you had to do a probability distribution to figure out your upside downside in an equity. And venture capitalists are inherently optimistic, and most people in the capital markets are optimistic sorts. And so if you can't put yourself into what doesn't matter whether I'm right per se or guess wrong, it matters what most of the people at the poker table are doing. So you have to understand, what their expectations are.
Yep.
And in job search,
go ahead, sorry.
And in job search is similar, where I just think I just can't tell you how many times I meet with a candidate and they're saying, well, this has got to be about me. And I'm saying there's about 90 other alternative explanations, most of which is about a hiring freeze at Citi, and it has nothing to do with you. And you just have to get through the anointed list at Citibank.
Yep. I chair a couple of meetings smaller than this one, and I always tell the new folks, it ain't you. Unless you're fired for cause, you're just one of the many, and chin up, get through it. And what I've been reading recently is to reframe things, which is similar to what you're talking about. Like, there's multiple ways of looking at a situation, and the challenge is find more work, right? Yep. You can go into a funk, or you can frame it as an opportunity to do something totally different and something you're going to enjoy more than what you just came out of. So I'm with you. I'm going to try to get the Learned Optimism book, and we'll talk. Thanks. Rick, are you there? Maybe you're on mute. I don't know. I can't.
Oh, sorry. I'm here. I'm here. I just
your bio.
Yeah, this is what I do, and if you want to get a hold of me, you can just LinkedIn me. Trying to think what else we should talk about. Did I answer Michael Bennett's question of how would I use this if I don't really want to work in a private company?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Rick. I didn't want to interrupt you by jumping in to thank you.
Okay. Because
I grabbed three screenshots.
There you go. So now you vetted them.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
Rick, I thought you made a good point before people came on about if you guys are buying new computers and the AI situation. Can you just share that a little bit? Because it kind of relates to all the research and things we're going to be doing.
Yeah. So I just bought this new Mac, and um so I started using it yesterday. And the good news is it's wicked fast, and you can see it by the camera that you can see the lines on my face. The resolution is incredibly high. But one of my friends said to me, just be careful, because a lot of these new AI tools are going to come up, and you have to make sure that you're protected with intrusion detection. So I got CrowdStrike and some other tool. It's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, with this tool, it precludes strikes from rogue. But then when I wanted to upload the professional trading platform from Schwab, it wouldn't let me start it. So, and I think that they didn't recognize sink or swim as an example. So I'm now trying to deal with this whole issue of, I want to keep the bad guys out, but I want the good guys to come in. And there's a constructive tension between trying to figure out how to do that. This is evolving. This is a state of the art. And when I was talking to the guy at Schwab yesterday, he says, yeah, we're trying to figure out if maybe the new version of the operating system of the Mac and CrowdStrike, and we couldn't figure out, well, who was at fault that I couldn't load certain things. But what I want you all to figure out is, when you get these new computers, ask someone you trust what intrusion detection you need, and is there any inadvertent security issues that you should be careful about? Because what my friend told me yesterday is open source AI 4.0 becomes public data, anything that you query. All right. There's a gentleman who raised his hand there. I can't. Oh, David. Why don't you go, David? You're good? No? Okay. Sorry, David.
So, Rick, are you saying that any results you get back from your query becomes public domain information?
Well, anything you add about yourself, if I put in this bio and say, please rewrite it, it's public domain. So,
Right,
so
you said the prompt, but the actual document that comes back is now public domain information, you're saying?
It becomes a part of the data set, the training set.
Okay,
yes.
so no expectation of privacy whatsoever.
I would assume the worst. So
Yep.
I wouldn't take your banking statement with your routing number and checking account number and stick it on this. That would not be a good
Yep.
idea.
Understood, thanks.
All right. Can I just ask a few questions? How many of you guys had ever seen PitchBook before? And what is your reaction to how you would use this in your process? Because I just want to see if anybody thinks it would be additive.
This is my first demo I've seen, and was always scared away by the likely subscription. But if I can get to somebody that has it already, their company or New York Public Library, I think Greenwich, Connecticut has it also at their library. I'm going to find out by 9 a.m. tomorrow and dig in.
I mean, it would be great if we could find the answer to that, and then either Adele or someone could send to each of the participants of this how to gain access to it, because I think that's the issue.
Yeah, we'll
Adele,
do.
I'll find out. I'll let you know what I find out, Adele.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll send that plus the slides and this recording so that people, can go back and review it. But I thought
right.
this was unbelievably helpful. And frankly, as a partner at a law firm, this is also how I get clients, and getting clients is really getting a job every single day. So it's the same thing. It's really how we build our networks every day, whether we have a job or not.
Absolutely. Gary Kaplan has a
Because we're
question. Oh, sorry, Adele, didn't mean to.
Well, I was going to say, we're all really looking for a job because down the road, you're going to be looking for a job that's 3 jobs down the road, and you've got to do the networking now. So no matter what you're doing, nobody's sitting around. Everybody's doing all this stuff.
Yeah, I
Go
just
ahead.
I'm a firm believer in this pay it forward, just carve out time in your week to give informational interviews to other people when you're employed, because what goes around will come around when you need to call on that network. All
Really
right.
scary how much information is available out there.
Yeah. David, what information is available out there?
Just all the things you were showing us. I mean,
yeah,
you got,
it's quite incredible.
and the
All right.
Twitter stuff you talked about was really a little bit unnerving.
Well, yeah, actually, Gary, why don't you ask this question? I'm
Yeah.
going to show
No.
you.
It wasn't a question, more comment, in that I think as you were giving your demo, I thought I saw a filter that can be for regional banks as another example, which, this could be it's a game changer, right? As opposed to trying to bottoms up your target, this can help you, right, come more at a top down level. It's a game changer.
And the truth is that the vast majority of people are not active on LinkedIn unless you're a recruiter or you're looking for a job. So, even if some of the people that you want to connect with have a profile, if they're not regularly checking it, it becomes, not that helpful.
All right, so I just want to show you this for a second. So this is Patrick Collison, who's the founder of Stripe. He's only following 29 people, but I think his brother, as I remember, let me see if there's another Collison.
Chuck.
Yeah, John, here we go. Right, here we go. Co-founder Stripe. He's following 1,400 people. If I were interviewing a Stripe, and it's not surprising, look who he's following. Bill Gurley, who's Mr. VC, right? So the interlocking of all this is just phenomenal. And I won't say anything about the vanity of the VC community, but they all want to see each other, making their. This is like a who's who of important people. This guy's a prophet at Columbia and was a former Credit Suisse guy. And a lot of these people. So okay.
Well, with that, do you want to just give a final comment and then we're going to let people go? But this was amazing and it was very
Adele,
generous of you to give up time.
Adele, Galit Bernstein has her hand up, maybe a quick
Oh,
question.
go ahead.
Quick question.
Yeah, I just want to comment about PitchBook. I've been working with Blackmore Connect and doing some virtual conferences, and they presented PitchBook as something that costs thousands of dollars, and that they provide access to it if you participate in their conference. So I'm surprised here that we can get it for free, or am I wrong?
We were not confirming you get it for free. We're wondering whether the New York Public Library offers it. It could be that this is a razor blade, that there's a limited functionality query that's at the library. I don't know.
Okay. And just for a personal share, I've been in the interim for the last 5 years, so getting to jobs is really always a surprise of what's going on. But one example of the last week is that I changed the way I posted jobs on via LinkedIn. I added why do I fit to this job section, and I took all the job requirements into my resume and allocated the companies that I had experience with those skills. And another example is that networking is important, but also one person that didn't work with me in the past, but he was one of the companies that I worked with, and he reached out to me with 2 opportunities just because he knows me for something that I did good to that company. So you can never know what networking can lead.
Thank you. Appreciate that comment.
All right, Rick, thank you. It's amazing, really great.
All right, everybody. Great to meet you all. And if I can help, you have my email address and my LinkedIn. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great,
Thank
Rick.
you, Rick.